Okay, in this video, we're going to take a spreadsheet that has some names that is first name, last name, and switch that up to where it's last name, comma, first name. Because sometimes you have spreadsheets that look like the one that's here, and for sorting, it's pretty much worthless. Nobody sorts by first name. You need this by last name. So we're going to show you how to do that today. And it requires a couple steps here. And the first step is to take all these names here and split them up into separate cells. Okay? So the first thing you're going to do is highlight your first column, and you're going to right click that and insert column to the right. And just keep on doing that a few times because we need 4 or 5 columns. It's better to have more columns than you need than not enough columns. So I'm just going to add about 5 of these things. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've added 5 columns. Next, we need to separate these names into separate cells. And so you do that by highlighting a name and go to Data and choose Split Text to Columns. You get this little tiny pop-up box here that says Separator Detect Automatically. Choose that arrow there, and instead of automatically, choose space. And the reason is because the name is Nancy Drew that we have highlighted, and there's a space in between Nancy and Drew. So that space is the separator that we're using. So we're going to choose space, and as you can see here, Nancy and Drew are now into 2 separate cells. Okay? So let's do that for all of them. We can do that for all of them by selecting them all. Again, going Data, and then Split Text to Columns, and choosing Space again. And now they're all into separate little cells, each part of each name. Now that we have that done, now we can combine them together again with last name and then first name. But before we do that, notice that some of these have very simple names like Nancy Drew, and some have much more complicated names like Samuel de la Hoya III. Okay? Now, what we need to do is kind of, on those complicated ones, combine them so that it only comes to 2 columns. Okay? On Samuel de la Hoya, well, de la Hoya is obviously his last name. Even though there are spaces with de and la and Hoya, we still want to separate those. So, de la Hoya, let's put that all into 1 column. And usually, I don't worry about the third. You can put the third in there if you want to, but De La Hoya. We have Mark T. Hall. Usually you don't really need the middle initial in there, so I'm going to just take this and put the Hall in there. And then Mary Ann Davis. And this is an interesting one because we can see that her last name is probably not Ann Davis. Her last name is probably Davis. Her first name may be Mary Ann. So if she goes by Mary Ann, we're going to go Mary Ann there and put the Davis into this column, okay? Once you have those kind of fixed so that they're all into 2 columns, now we can combine them back together with last name first and then first name last. And to do that, we use a formula. And the formula we use is called Concatenate. Here's how you do it. Highlight the cell next to, highlight the cell in which you want to actually put the new last name, first name format of the name. And so right next to Nancy Drew, we're going to put in the very next cell right there. And then what we're going to do is type. We're going to type a formula. And whenever you type a formula, you always start with the equal sign. So it's equal, I get the wrong one, equal, equal. And then we're going to start typing concatenate because that's what this is called. C-O-N-C-A-T. Now you see it popped up at the bottom. So at this point you can just go down there and choose it. And notice the description is append strings to one another. That's what concatenate means. It's a stringing together of things. Concatenate. Now, it has equal concatenate with a parenthesis. In the parenthesis, that's where you put what we're going to string together. We're going to have an open parenthesis and a closed parenthesis at the end. So concatenate. First, we want the last name. So all we need to do there as a cursor in this box under column C is flashing. We're going to go over to the last name, which is Drew, and click on it. And notice that when we clicked on it, it put B2 as the first thing we're going to string together, because B2 is where the last name is for Nancy Drew. Okay? In between each element that we have in our string, we need a comma. So B2, comma. Well, what we need is last name, and then a comma, and then a space, and then the first name. So we have the last name, B2 is where the last name is, then a comma. Then we need an actual comma to show up. So whenever you have an actual text of something, like a comma or like a space, that needs to be surrounded by quotation marks to show this actually has to show up. So we're going to do quotation mark, comma, quotation mark. And that means that the next thing in quotation marks is going to be a comma. So we have B2, comma, quotation mark, comma, quotation mark. Now we need another comma, because that comma now separates the comma that's going to show up from the next thing. The next thing we need is a space. So again, quotation mark, space, hit your space bar, and quotation mark. And that means we're going to put a space in there. Now we need to separate the space from the last thing we're going to put in there, which is the first name. So we do another comma to separate the space from the first name. The first name then is found in this cell over here in A2. And so all we need to do is click there, and it automatically puts in A2. At this point now we need to close it all up, because all the elements that we want to combine are actually now in this cell. It's equal concatenate B2 comma, quotation mark, comma, quotation mark, comma, quotation mark, space, quotation mark, comma, A2. Then we're going to put a closed parenthesis, and then we press our enter key. And notice what we have there. It says Drew, comma, Nancy, just like we want it. It's actually asking if we want to autofill this, and you can press this check mark and it will actually put it in there just like it shows there highlighted in green. That's what I would recommend you to do, but if for some reason yours doesn't do that, I want to show you another way to make this happen. So I'm going to X off that as if we didn't want this to happen. But then I'm going to highlight Drew, comma, Nancy, which is cell C2. Notice when I put my cursor there, up in the area right in here, we have the formulas. It doesn't say Nancy Drew. It actually has the formula that we had to come up with Nancy Drew. Okay? Interesting. So if we take that formula and we apply that formula to all these other cells underneath, just changing the cell number or cell name, we should get last name, comma, first name for all of them. And the easiest way to do that is not to do a lot more typing, because we have the formula correct, is to highlight on this little tiny square that's in the right lower side of cell C2 where it says Nancy Drew. You see a little tiny box there. When you hover over it, you have kind of a crosshair that kind of is over it. So with that crosshair showing as you're hovering over it, you want to click on your mouse or on your trackpad on the left side, hold it down, and then go ahead and go all the way down to the Heather James, which is C8, and then let go. And when you do that, there they all are. They're all perfectly in there with last name, comma, first name, just like we need them to be. However, we're not done yet, because as I said, these are formulas, and you can't sort a formula. It's just going to get all messed up. So we're going to highlight all these, just like that, and then we're going to do a Control C. Control C is how we copy. We're going to go into the next box over, the next cell over, which is D2, and we're going to paste in there but we're going to have a special kind of a paste. We just want to paste the values and not the formula. Because if we just do a paste, like a Control V or an edit paste, it's going to give us the formula. We don't want the formula, we want the values. The actual thing that shows up here instead of the formula. In other words, we want it to actually say Nancy Drew. So we can do that in one of two ways. We can either do Control Shift V, or we can go over here to the edit and do paste special and do values only. And either one will work. So since we're here, we'll do paste values only. We'll click on that, and there we have it. And notice this time when we highlight or choose cell D2, up here in the formula bar it says Drew, Nancy, just like it does down here in cell D2. If we go over to cell C2, it doesn't, it has the formula. Because over here we don't have a formula because we actually just pasted the values that formula represents. Okay? Once we've done that, we can get rid of all this other stuff before it. So we're going to do that. I'm going to highlight all of this. And we're going to go to Edit and to Delete. And we're going to delete all of these cells and to shift to the left. Because what that's going to do is going to get rid of all the highlighted cells and shift our value over under that column where it says name. So let's choose that. And there you have it right there. Now we have some extra cells in here, and we can highlight those. And we can delete those as well. Delete columns B through D. And now, we have these extra cells up here in the header too. Let's get rid of those as well. Delete cells and shift left. And now we have the name, we have the grade, we have the gender, and we have the teacher, but all these names now are actual text names of last name first, first name last, and now we can actually sort these. If I highlight that and I do a data sort from A to Z, which is, a sort that gives us Davis to start with and Severson at the end, an alphabetical kind of sort, it works perfectly, okay? And that's how you do it. That's how you change first name first, last name last, to last name first, first name last. Did I say that right? Yeah, I think it did. So that you can sort better. It's a formula called Concatenate. Hope this helps. See you next time.